Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. My name is Sadia, and today I will share a true story from my life. At that time, I was 9 years old. I remember that our house had everything, and we lacked nothing. We were living a happy life with our parents. My father had a lot of property, and the income from it provided us with happiness. He was raising us with love and care. Unfortunately, this period of joy and carefree living didn't last long. One day, my father went to the market for some work, and there was a bomb explosion. My father's body was never found, and before any funeral arrangements could be made, he tragically became a martyr, losing his life at the scene. We were 3 siblings, and all 3 of us became orphans at a young age. My mother was still young at the time. She became widowed at that age and confined herself to the house. She was very beautiful, and people would express their sympathy and sadness when they saw her. After a few days of sympathy, people started giving different kinds of suggestions. Some suggested remarriage, while others advised her to dedicate her life to raising the children. No one seemed to consider the reality that when the breadwinner is gone, how will a widow provide for her children? How would we 3 children be educated and raised? Although we owned property, the income from the land and assets became disordered, and everything fell apart. My mother had completed her matriculation, and my maternal family advised her, "Zainab, don't sit idle. If you don't take charge of the property, your in-laws and brothers-in-law will not give you a single penny." Reluctantly, my mother stepped outside the house. She went to a lawyer, a friend of my father, to discuss the situation and seek his advice. When my uncle found out that my mother wanted to manage the property, he was very displeased. He not only scolded her harshly, but also started making accusations against her. They even tried to link my mother's relationship with the lawyer, who was only trying to help her, to create a scandal and pressure her to give up any legal assistance. It was then that I realized being a widow is not just misfortune, it's considered a crime. And every widow faces the punishment of unjust accusations after losing her husband. When the situation became unbearable, my grandparents' maternal side took my mother to their home to protect her from the wrongful accusations of my uncles. My uncles, driven by greed for the inheritance, could have done anything to take advantage of the situation. Some time passed, and our relatives suggested to my grandparents that my mother, who was only 27 years old, should remarry. They argued that she had many years ahead of her, and how could she live without a partner? They also decided that my siblings and I should be handed over to our uncles, as they had children of their own, and they would take care of us. If we weren't given to them, they threatened that we would be deprived of our father's inheritance, and they would seize it using deceit. My mother refused to remarry, but the pressure from my uncles and relatives continued. Eventually, under their forceful persuasion, she was married off to one of my uncle's sons. At that time, I was 11 years old, my younger sister Rania was 9, and our brother Bilal was only 2. When my mother remarried, we, being so young and innocent, didn't feel sad about her remarriage. Instead, we were happy that our mother was wearing nice clothes and jewelry, looking like a bride again. I still remember the sadness of my mother as she bride on the day of her second marriage. I was a bit wiser then, and I became upset seeing her tears. She was telling my grandmother, "Why are you forcing me to go to someone else's house when I don't want to? Why are you sending me there?" Little did I know, as soon as my mother would leave my grandparents' house, my uncles would come to take us. We were taken to my uncle's house, and for a few days, we 3 siblings felt very sad. We did miss our mother, but soon we became close with my uncle's children. My aunt took great care of us and loved us like her own children. We began to forget our mother. Rania was very cheerful and mischievous. She looked just like our mother, very beautiful and lively. On the other hand, I was serious and sensitive, and I rarely laughed. Rania and Bilal were immersed in playing games when they came to our maternal grandparents' house, but I often became lost in my thoughts. I was very passionate about studying and was obsessed with it. I wanted to study and become a support for my mother and bring honor to my father's name. When my mother went to seek permission from my grandparents' father's side for her second marriage, they said, "Sister-in-law, if you transfer the rights of the property to your children, then we won't object to your second marriage." Their second condition was that they would take me and Rania with them, but Bilal could stay with his mother. When he turned 7, they would bring him back to their house because, being so young, he might not be able to live without his mother. The man whom my mother married agreed to these conditions. He said, "I accept these terms. I just want to marry Zainab. I have no claim on the property of her late husband. That is the children's inheritance, and it should go to them." We lived comfortably in my uncle's house for 4 or 5 years. Then they arranged my marriage to their son. However, there was a problem with Rania's marriage because my uncle had no children, and my other uncle's eldest son was already married. There was no one in the family suitable for Rania. Marrying her outside the family would mean her share of inheritance would go elsewhere. To solve this, my uncle arranged a marriage for Rania, ensuring that the man would sign an agreement stating that she would only inherit her father's property if she had a male child. Rania's in-laws said, "We don't need your property. We have everything we need from Allah. We just want the girl." Rania got married and moved to her in-laws' house. Initially, they treated her very well and didn't mention anything about property or inheritance, which reassured everyone. My uncle's main goal was to somehow deprive these orphaned girls of their rightful inheritance. The last obstacle remaining was my little brother Bilal. My uncles had still not returned him to my mother, and he remained sad and longing for her because he was very young. Finally, my uncles agreed to send him to my mother on the condition that he would visit them on Eid and Bakra Eid. When he turned 7, they would take him back to their house. By then, Allah had blessed me with 2 sons, and my share of the property naturally passed on to my uncle's house. Meanwhile, Rania's husband also began to demand his share. He said, "Although we have daughters, you are also entitled to inheritance. Your uncles should give you your share of the land and property so that their children can benefit from it as well." They had already taken control of the land and its production, enjoying the income and profits themselves. They would say, "Until Bilal becomes an adult, we will keep his share's earnings in the bank. When he comes of age, we will hand it over to him, and it will be up to him how he uses it." This is what was agreed upon by the family elders. The day Rania would have a son, she would receive her inheritance. However, since Rania was married outside the family, she wasn't receiving anything from her father's property. Her in-laws wouldn't let her near the land because it was still in the possession of my uncles, and they were making the profits. Rania became quite distressed as her in-laws refused to give her a share of the land's production, and they even stopped her from coming to our house. A girl who has no parents and whose relatives don't even care about her. What status would she have in her in-laws' house? As the truth about my sister's helplessness began to unfold, her in-laws started to torment her. Allah did not bless her with a son, which would have strengthened her position in her husband's home. She had 2 daughters, and for their birth, she was taunted. They said she would only give birth to daughters. One day, her father-in-law asked my poor sister to demand her inheritance. But when she couldn't get anything from my uncles, her husband, in a drunken state, beat her and threw her out of the house. When Rania was thrown out in the middle of the night, she knocked on the neighbor's door. But since there had been a lot of arguing that day, the neighbor didn't open the door, worried it might be some trouble. Rania had a little money in her purse. She went to the bus stop to look for a ride to get to our house, but in the village there were no rickshaws or taxis. A man, seeing her distressed, came over and asked where she wanted to go and why she was so upset. He told her there would be no buses at that hour, and the first bus would leave in the morning. Rania, very anxious, explained, "My husband has thrown me out after a fight, and I want to go to my uncle's house in the village of name of village. But I don't know how to get there at this time. It's far, and there's no ride." The man, whose name was Bahadur Khan, said, "If you trust me, I'm going that way, and I will drop you at your uncle's house." After thinking for a moment, Rania got into his car. Bahadur Khan was not a good person. He sold girls to other men, and he sold Rania to a villager for 100,000 rupees and left after collecting the money. Meanwhile, when Rania went missing, her in-laws were worried. They didn't know what to tell anyone or how to explain her disappearance. Her husband soon realized what had happened and went looking for her, asking her acquaintances and visiting their homes. When he couldn't find her, to cover himself, he spread a rumor that Rania had been involved with a man and had left with him. He told my uncles and aunts this story, which caused a stir in the whole family. Rania's husband also filed a report at the police station about her disappearance. The only people who mourned Rania's disappearance were me and my mother. We were still reeling from the sorrow when my little brother Bilal, who was 6 at the time, went to visit my uncles for Eid. He went missing too. Here's what happened. On the third day of Eid, my uncle was supposed to drop him off at my mother's house, but on the way, he left him at a small railway station and returned alone. Later, he claimed that Bilal had gotten off at the station. When my uncle woke up from a nap, he realized that Bilal was missing. When my mother found out, her eyes filled with tears and her heart was filled with pain. Not only had my daughter gone missing, but now my son was also lost. If only my parents hadn't remarried, this wouldn't have happened. It was the result of my greedy and malicious uncle's actions, which led to my siblings being handed over to the cruelty of the world. And now finding them was like searching for a needle in a haystack. My mother tried to find them in every possible way, but success could not be achieved in the dark. Our only hope was prayer. So all of us, my mother, my grandparents, and my uncles, kept praying to Allah, please reunite us with Bilal and Rania. Days turned into months, and months turned into years, and finally 12 years passed. In the meantime, my uncle passed away after suffering from blood cancer. Before he died in immense pain, he confessed that he had deliberately left my innocent Bilal at a small railway station so that he wouldn't inherit the property. 12 years later, one day, a woman came to our house from a village. She was selling bangles and had a basket of them on her head. While talking, she mentioned that her daughter lived in the same village where Rania had been married. She revealed that 12 years ago, a man had brought Rania and sold her to another man, and the person who had bought her was named Akbar. He lived near her daughter's house. Rania, she said, still cried for her family and remembered them. When I heard Rania's name, I became alert and asked the woman for more details. She confirmed that the girl had been crying and said, I miss my family. For the sake of property, her in-laws began to argue, and her husband, in a drunken state, threw her out of the house one night. She cried, remembering her daughters, calling their names. When the bangle seller heard this from her mother, I showed her Rania's picture and asked, is this the same girl? The bangle seller carefully looked at the photo and said, yes, this is her. She lives near my daughter's house. Now, Akbar and Rania have 4 children, but she still cannot forget her first children. After hearing this, I became restless and asked the bangle seller to give me the address of her daughter's house. I informed my husband, and he was ready to leave immediately. We packed our things in an hour and headed to the village to find Akbar's house. When we arrived, Rania's son opened the door. We told him we wanted to meet Rania, and he quickly went to fetch her. As soon as Rania saw me, she screamed and hugged me. We sisters finally reunited after years, and we both cried a lot. When Akbar Muhammad came home and saw us, he was surprised. We explained that we were Rania's relatives, and he welcomed us with a smile. He said, I have no objection to meeting Rania, but 12 years ago, a truck driver named Bahadur Khan sold her to me for 100,000 rupees. She had no family. I married her, and now we have 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. I cannot let her go, as my children will be devastated, and she herself cannot bear to be separated from them. You are welcome to visit her any time, but please do not take her with you. My husband asked for the police's help, but Rania refused, saying, I have already suffered the pain of being separated from my daughters. I can't endure the pain of losing 4 more children. Now that I have met you, half of my sorrow is gone. Please come to visit me whenever you can, but do not take me with you. Who will accept me now? I will only bring disgrace and shame to myself. We respected Rania's wishes, and gradually she trusted Akbar Muhammad. Rania's first husband passed away 3 years ago due to excessive drinking. Her daughters were married off by their grandfather to his grandsons. Rania finally got her rightful inheritance, which my husband ensured she received. However, how much suffering did we have to endure before getting it? My uncles, who had tortured my siblings for this property, were no longer in this world. They didn't realize that everyone leaves this world empty-handed. A person can only take their deeds to the grave. I wish no one ever has property that can take away a person's children and happiness. We were reunited with Rania, but we still had no news of Bilal. However, Allah had accepted our prayers. A year later, Bilal returned to our home with a man. I couldn't recognize him at first because he had grown so much. My husband then had a DNA test done, and it confirmed that this was indeed my brother Bilal. My husband had doubts that someone could pose as Bilal and claim his inheritance. Finally, the reward of our prayers arrived. Through the day and night prayers of my mother and me, my brother finally came back. The man who brought Bilal had taken good care of him, treating him like his own son because he had no children of his own. Thank God Bilal remembered the name of his village. When he mentioned it, the man took him to the place and easily found our house. We were well-known landowners, so everyone in the village recognized us. Bilal still lives with the man and his wife, whom he considers his parents. He takes care of them as they raised him with love and care. My husband has also given Bilal his rightful share. We are so grateful to Allah because now all three of us, the siblings, are very happy. However, this happiness did not come easily. We had to endure a lot of pain and suffering to finally find peace. The happiness we have now was earned after going through great hardships.